Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
And Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. A new episode dropped on Thursday with Jeff Mosher and this man, Adam Caplan from InsideTheBirds.com and the Inside the Birds podcast. He joins me now on this Happy Hour Friday where OTAs concluded. The Eagles' offseason program is now in the book. They had a short little practice on Wednesday. Adam was there with some observation, news, and notes. But I got to tell you, Adam, I got such tremendous feedback from our conversation the other day going down. How many people told me that they never knew a lot of the stuff that we were talking about? So that was a fun story that's gotten a lot of feedback here as we wrap up OTAs. How are you on this Friday?
Yeah, no, I'm well, thanks. It's funny because I didn't know, as I said when we were doing that segment, that you were going to go in that direction. But I love that stuff. I love jogging the memory of the 17 year because there's so much happened that year. I happened to be at that game in L.A. when Wentz tore his ACL. And then the great run and the craziness of Nick Foles' run, which came out of nowhere, and that joyride. And then, I think I might have told you, I believe I did, when we all flew back the night before the game because Andrew Brandt and I and Sean Landetta flew back, and that flight when there were only 10 of us on the flight and the craziness of the game, and you just, growing up in this market as I did, Mike, it's still something that I cannot believe that happened, and the way it happened. It's just you couldn't make that season up. And one other thing before we get to what we were going to talk to today, I don't know what you thought coming into the season. I texted someone right before the season who I exchanged notes with in the Eagles front office. He says, okay, what do you think of us this year? I said 9-7, and the guy said he'd take that. Think about that, Mike.
Wow, that's there's another little nugget from Adam Caplan there because, right, they had gone 7-9 the year before with a rookie quarterback. And, hey, if he develops and gets us to 2 extra wins, I guess that's good development. We now know what happens. But this team here, what about the development of the quarterback? We know that Jalen Hurts and his mechanics, that was a big topic of conversation. Nick Sirianni brought it up, and you got a chance to see him up close and personal.
Yeah, now, again, we have to make this really clear here because I struggle to call them practices. The coaches will say that they're practices because they're practicing, because they're actually going. There is competition. But understand, they do nothing more than 7-on-7. And as one Eagles observer said to me, gosh, these practices are even later than when Doug was here for 7-on-7 in OTAs. So there's no fly swatters. You remember the fly swatters where Chip Kelly had those big nylon nets where they'd hold them up and the quarterback should have to move and sort of bob and weave and throw the football? There's nothing even like that. There's no pass rush. But Jalen Hurts was really good in Wednesday's practice. He definitely was. He had 2 deep balls in a row. One was for about 50 yards. The second was 60. The 60-yarder had a little bit of a wobble on it to, I think, John Hightower. Mm-hmm. But both were long. Look, I know he was not under any duress, and it's an untimed down. He literally could take as long as he wanted, but he still hit them. And you could see Quez Watkins and that explosiveness. That's one area. It's their third receiver. He's going to line up a lot inside. And it's hard to find vertical slots like Watkins. That's a pretty good role for him, and he'll do that this season.
I like your point of, it's untimed and, there's no pass rush. But I guess, Adam, one question last year with Jalen is, can he push the ball down the field? Can he take shots down the field? Is that an area where he needed or needs to show improvement?
It is. And, Mike, the one time he did it was actually, it's funny, because as he was completing the first one, I go, wait a minute, that was very similar to the one where he hit Watkins for the 91-yarder, or whatever it was, 92-yarder against the Niners, where he might have thrown it 50, 55, 60 yards in the air. Remember, he rolled out to his right, and he hit a bomb to Watkins on the dead run. Now, that one he rolled out. Look, that was in a real game against the Niners in Lincoln Financial Stadium, where there was a pass rush. But when they had him roll out away from the pass rush, so he got a clean look. Yeah, and answer your question here, yes, he needs to improve in that area. And now that you have Quez Watkins, who'll be certainly a big part of their passing game when they want to throw downfield, A.J. Brown, who basically makes his bread and butter on passes over the middle, 20, 25 yards, and running after the catch, You have to be able to do that. Those are not easy passes to hit. And obviously, Devontae Smith could run. We all know that. They did not use him in a lot of deep routes last year. I would expect that to change.
So there's Jalen Hurts. We, obviously are all he's the one big guy that needs to take a big jump here. We obviously think. Miles Sanders is another guy. I think he's kind of flying under the radar a little bit here because A.J. Brown, everybody wants to see Smith in year number 2. Hurts gets a lot of attention. How about the running back, Miles Sanders?
Yeah, we, Mike, Mosher and I were there Wednesday, and I said to him, I might be wrong about this, but he looks bigger physically. And I asked someone who would know and said, yes, it is true. On the lower body, he's had soft tissue injuries, a bunch of them. 1 year, we reported on Inside the Birds that he had both hamstrings had strains. Remember that offseason he didn't really practice? That was because of the hamstring strains. So, yeah, he definitely needs to stay in shape. This is a big year for him. This is a contract year. This is his walk year. He's got to play well to have a chance to come back. And I'm expecting him to have a big year. Now, I know he didn't score last year, which is kind of ridiculous. But I'm expecting him to be very active. It's not like he's in a big sharing situation, though Kenny Gainwell and Boston Scott are the backups. They're pretty good backups. But this is a monster year for Sanders. He knows it. Everybody knows it. And I expect him to have a good season.
Yeah, Sanders, and I think Jeff might have mentioned this on Football at 4 a couple of weeks ago. Like, hey, this is a contract year. Do the Eagles use him more? Do they, just say, hey, let's just get the most out of him in that last contract year? As many running backs don't get that next contract.
Yeah, teams don't really look at it that way. They do whatever it takes to win. And there's no one as good as Boston Scott maybe in that backup role, and Kenny Gainwell. We're going to have some. By the way, we're going to do an entire offseason program review. We have a lot more information off of our last show for Monday, so we'll talk more. We're going to take a giant overview of what their offense looked like in the OTAs, but I could certainly tell you that Kenny Gainwell's a guy they really like a lot.
Yeah.
But the only thing with him last year, Mike, is he had a decent amount of catches.
Yeah.
Where were the explosive plays with him? That I'd like to see.
Right, because he's a guy that's what we, had heard coming in. Speaking of explosive plays, we don't know if he's going to make the team, but he's a guy that can really run, and that's Britton Covey. Small guy. You just mentioned Watkins, a guy who can run that deep type of pattern from the slot. Those guys are hard to find. Covey is a small guy, and he's a guy that we heard a lot about from Wednesday's practice. Yeah,
he is, Mike. We did get the Eagles PR staff gave us the rosters. I would have guessed 5'6". They list him as 5'8". I'm not doubting it. He is really small. He looks like a little slot receiver who's also going to return punts. But for a guy as small as he is, he can get open. He gets off. He can get off the line a little bit. But again, folks, you can't have physical play in OTAs. You're not allowed to, or you can get fined if the players report it to the NFLPA. So Covey is a kid that. He's got a real shot here. I know it's early, but from what we understand, he's got a real shot. But here's the thing. The only true other slot they have is Greg Ward, and Greg Ward, we know, he calls a fair catch. His nickname is Fair Catch Ward on punt returns.
Yeah.
So they need someone who can move the ball on punts, and that kid could do it.
Yeah.
And the shame of it is, Mike, is that Jalen Reagor, this is one of the roles he should have had, and he obviously has not been able to do it well enough.
No, and you wonder if Covey's a guy who could just make the team as a specialist. Can he, and as a receiver as well, but where his main role is return man?
It's a good question because they got the kid, the track star, who was not available for a little bit, who was really good in college. This was 6 years ago. They've got enough guys who can do it. See, that's the thing. They've got a lot of competition, Mike, for the punt and kickoff returner jobs. And there's some, I don't want to say there's pressure on the special team staff, but the coaches really have to get the special teams returns going. The kid, Tyler Brown, did a great job last year in getting Jake Elliott to improve. My gosh, did he improve? Now they got to get Sipos, the punter, going. He obviously was inconsistent, but you notice they did not bring another punter in for the offseason program.
Yeah. Defensively, let's flip over there, and you take a look at that number 3 cornerback spot on the outside. We got Bradbury, obviously, and Slay, who are going to be the starters. But if one of those guys ended up getting hurt here, who are some of the guys they're looking at as that next guy?
Yeah, so when you really look at it, their third outside spot is going to go to McPherson unless something happens where Jimmy Moreland, who they claimed off waiver from Houston, who's now been in 3 teams in 2 years, whether it's Josiah Scott, who could play inside or outside, they've got Kerry Vincent, who's there, and they've got Mac McCain. They got the 2 rookies. They got Mario Goodrich and Josh Jobe, who they're giving some good money to for undrafted free agents. They're all going to be there. They're all going to be there in training camp. And in a way, you could say it's open, but clearly McPherson is the lead guy. I think that's obvious. But nothing would surprise me if someone beats him out. I know the Eagles like him a lot, but they gave a lot of money to these 2 undrafted kids, and Jobe especially is pretty talented. Goodrich. The problem with him is he was injured the offseason. That's why he didn't get drafted, because he wasn't able to run. But that job, that's one training camp battle. There are not a lot that are open. I'm going to call that job open, that 3rd cornerback job, that outside job.
Yeah, I agree with you that that's going to be something to watch. And the starting secondary, they were out there, and the fact that they have those 2 guys is nice. But, hey, an injury happens, and you're right back to where we were talking about the offseason of who's going to be the other guy. That's what all these guys are going to be battling. And you just mentioned the long list of guys, but the starting group out there, Bradbury and Slay, you're looking at 2 guys that you hope don't go down.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I was talking to Mosher about that earlier today. How in the world did they get so lucky that Nelson and Slay did not get hurt enough that they had to miss time? They got very lucky, and they cannot take that chance again. So to me, if they go through training camp and they're not happy, they would have to sign a veteran. I know they want to go with the young kids and see what kind of shakes out, but that 3rd outside corner position, I know if the 2 starters are healthy, you're talking to guys who only get 10 or 15% play time. But again, if somebody gets hurt, they've got a real issue.
All right, Adam Caplan, football at 4 here on the Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN. We discussed this, about last Friday when we were on, and we touched on it a little bit the other day. But Nick Sirianni spoke on Wednesday and was asked about not calling the plays. Now, this is the first time he's been asked about it because Shane Steichen kind of let the cat out of the bag. He elaborated on a bit. And then our old buddy John McMullen asked a question to Sirianni about the play calling. What did Nick Sirianni have to say about the role and how this is all going to work out with the play calling?
Yeah, this is what I think. And I just listened to him the other day on Wednesday after practice. I think what happened as a rookie head coach, they got off. Yes, they did great against Atlanta, but then they really struggled the first half. He saw what was happening on offense. They had to get Hurts really righted, and then the defense really struggled. And I think as a rookie head coach, there's a lot of pressure on you when things aren't going your way. And he knows that Steichen called the plays for roughly a season and a half for the Chargers, all of Justin Herbert's rookie season, and then when Steichen was with the Chargers in 2019, Ken Wisenhunt was fired, and he took over on an interim basis to call the plays, and he knows that Steichen's done it. And by the way, he did a really good job 2 years ago with the Chargers in Herbert's first year. So Sirianni clearly felt that he can do it. And here's another nugget for you. I watched. One of the things I like to do is watch coaches coach at practice. Sirianni was going station to station to station. So was Kevin Patullo, his right-hand man. And that's because this staff, and one of the things we had heard with this staff is, I'm not saying the Doug Peterson staff wasn't into player development, but it seemed like they kind of lost that part of it, of their coaching. This staff, and one of the things I had heard from the Eagles front office was really impressed with, Sirianni made it a point to talk about player development in his interview in Florida, in January of 2021, and that really helped. I think that helped solidify get him that job because, Mike, the one criticism you saw, other than Josh Sweat and a couple other players, who was really developing from their former staff.
Yeah, and it's an interesting point you make is Sirianni who. Basically, I'm looking at the transcript of the answer. He went in depth on this answer. Like, I don't know, did they want to, really, really explain why this has happened? I mean, do you agree that he really went into an elongated explanation of why they're doing this? Yeah,
because I think what happened was he wanted to explain, A, why he did it, and B, how he's still involved. And he is. He's very heavily involved in game planning.
Yeah.
Leading up to each game. But he doesn't want to micromanage Shane Steichen. You never want to do that. If you're going to let the guy call the plays, let him call the plays.
Right.
But you're going to be involved. I mean, that's just the way it is. He's an offensive coach, and he did call the plays. The thing is, we don't know exactly. I know that Steichen said around halfway last season, but we're on an odd number of games, or 17. Was it week 8, 9, or 10? We don't know that. But it is interesting how starting week 6, they started becoming a running team, which no one saw coming. And Steichen's a guy that you have to give him credit. He did a pretty good job considering what he had to work with last season. He's a guy, and we haven't talked about this before because it just happened, because Steichen admitted it last Friday. I would say Steichen's under a little bit of pressure because of the money they spent on A.J. Brown. And you've got Devontae Smith in his second year, and there's no more Zach Ertz now. It's Dallas Goedert's job. And Jalen Hurts now in its second full off season as a starter, and obviously the second year in the scheme. There's a lot on this offensive staff to get things going here.
Well, and I guess on the flip side of that is if he calls, if they have a good offense this year, I guess he puts himself in position to get some interviews this offseason.
Sure. And one thing I think I'm going to mention this on the show on Tuesday. I know that he comes off as very boring, Shane Steichen, but someone who's coached with him before said that he's got great presence with the players and great command. And I was glad to hear that, because I have to tell you, and I don't really judge coaches by press conferences. I'm like, man, this guy's boring sometimes. He just is very, very formulaic and very boring and mundane with his responses to questions from the media. But I like that behind the scenes he's very vocal, and that was good to hear.
All right, Adam Caplan, football reporter. Before we run, I was having lunch today with my father and Pete Thompson, and we were talking about, I guess there was a Dick Vermeil spotting up at practice,
yes.
The who's of practice on Wednesday.
Yeah, it's funny. I know numbers by heart, so I know, hey, that's Frank LeMaster, number 55. I don't Google anything. I kind of know old Eagle numbers. And it was so cool because Frank LeMaster was part of that defense with John Bunting, number 95 for the Eagles Super Bowl team. They were really good. Very, very underrated. Roynell Young, we could go through the whole thing one day, but they were so underrated. And Bill Berge, of course, number 66. They should have beaten the Raiders. Vermeil should have loosened the reins up. They were too tight, if you remember. I don't know if you're old enough to remember that Super Bowl, but I was. And I remember being so disappointed that they lost that game. And Dick Vermeil, what a story. He absolutely deserves the Hall of Fame. He should have gotten it years ago, by the way. What he did, I'm old enough to remember when he came from UCLA. I remember being in elementary school, Mike, when he came here from UCLA. Being 10 years old or 9 years old, I followed college football then.
Yeah.
I just remember, how are they getting this guy? What is the connection? It's pretty incredible how he turned things around and how badly he wanted to beat Dallas. I absolutely love it back then.
All right, Adam Caplan, football 4 in the books for this happy hour Friday as the Eagles OTAs are in the books. And don't forget, next week we'll have more football at 4 on Thursday with Andrew. We'll take a look at the AFC South. Our division previews continue. We'll have more NFL news and notes, Eagles conversation as throughout the offseason. Football at 4 never goes away. Neither does the Inside the Birds podcast. You can get the new edition on Monday morning, 6 a.m., on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and the Inside the Birds platform. Jeff Mosher will be back. Adam, we'll talk to you next week, pal.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right, there's Adam Caplan here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN.